start first with the highest and best use. I want to make sure all of you guys understand the basic principle behind that. Yeah.
I haven't seen any answer key or explanation for the homework.
Yeah. Sorry?
With the responses or the homeworks or an analysis of what you should be writing for the questions you're asking. Is there one or?
Just what he covers in class. There's not we don't have an answer key per se for the homeworks. It's designed so that it engages you to think through what he's going to cover in the lecture. For today, I'm kind of the rezoning and the zoning components. And then last week on the timeline, with how it came together in actual deal structure.
And usually there's no like precise answer. Some of them are more theoretical. And he usually covers them the first 20, 30 minutes of class, but there's no key. Highest and best use, are you guys completely familiar with that? Should I go through it for just a second before I dive into the monolithic city? No?
Yeah, I think you could go for
All right. So I'll try to do it with examples. This was easier for me. I think the highest and best use derived from the fact that land is residual value, and basically after you have all the factors of production, say cost of whatever building you're gonna build or business you're gonna do, the last whatever is left is what's allocated to land. That's what why the professor is talking about an optionality. Having said that, if you have, for example, and this is probably a good example, we're a student from MIT. We're probably going to pay a premium to live close to MIT, right? Instead of living, I don't know, somewhere out in Newton, right? On the other hand, students from what's the university out there? BCPU, right? That's which one? Well, I think it's BC. Whatever the university is there, they're gonna pay a premium to live, close to there, right? Because they're gonna be closer to that. Now, if they live here in Kendall, they will be. I mean, they're not gonna pay the same price that you guys can pay, right? Now, if you extrapolate that to factors of production, say in a city, probably the guy that's going to build an office is going to pay more than someone that wants to build a big house or something like that, because probably the office can rent it for a higher price. So that same analogy, goes to the highest and best use. It's simply once you have a piece of land, you kind of beat it out to everyone, and the one that pays the most, that's actually the highest and best use for that piece of land, right? Yeah.
As a more tangible example, to piggyback off what Nana's saying, if you had a piece of dirt and you could put a single house on it, zoned residential, or it could be zoned commercial, and you could build an office complex. The obvious best use for that land would be what? Office complex, exactly. So what he's saying is the residual value from that development goes to the land, which is what Delton was talking about with the optionality. So that's going to net you the highest value for that parcel, as per se selling it to somebody to build a house on.
Yeah, just if you put it another way, say you have, again, a piece of dirt out in, I don't know, Omaha or something like that. And, you're going to sell it to a guy who's going to build a skyscraper. He's going to say, I'm not going to pay you much for that because I'm going to build a skyscraper. No one's going to want to live in it, right? Then again, you go to a guy who, crops corn or something like that. He's probably going to pay you more than that, more than the guy who's going to build a skyscraper is going to pay, because he can actually make use of that land, right? Now, if you go to the city again, the highest use will pay more for that. Yeah. Let's just go on.
In practice, is really how do you determine? So if you actually add somewhere that you are slightly ambiguous, you have to run a financial model saying we did it possibly for commercial, this is what it looks like, we did it for residential.
Yeah, that's a good question. In practice, it would be, you know, developers and different product developers, auto developers, retail developers, they have their, you know, their return on capital that they need to make it affordable for them, right? And basically that's what underwriting is. They underwrite the deal and they see if they can actually pay the price of the land that is being asked for and still maintain their levels of profits.
Right, so you'll have the financial side, and you also have the regulatory side, which is the government, which is your zoning and land use. Which you'll get that by the end of this course, you'll sit down with a piece of land and figure out whether you should put office, multifamily, you know, mini storage, that sort of thing. You'll get a pretty good feel for that. Eric?
So for the homework question, was that just an exercise to get us to think about that we need those two components in order to figure out the highest and best use of land? Because it was a hypothetical situation where there was no zoning in that question and we weren't running any numbers. So I guess is that the that exercise?
Theoretically, to get you thinking that direction.
I guess he wanted, you know, ultimately what he wanted to do is explain why Edwin bought that land. And it's basically to get that pop in the highest and best use, to change it from house or residential to commercial. And that's when you actually see a huge profit on the land.
Not to complicate this, but wouldn't the highest and best use be like very like time specific? So you have let's say two equal parcels of land right next to each other, and there's a demand in the market for 5,000 square feet of office space, which would be the highest and best use for either parcel, but one takes the option to build before the other, and now the highest and best use for the other is no longer 5,000 square feet. Is that, yeah, so like it's very like dynamic, right?
It's definitely dynamic, and it's actually a class that then is stage, I think, so on that line, you know, trying to determine the highest and best use evolution in the city. Because it's changing, I mean, you see it in, say, New York, you have, you know, the Meatpacking District wasn't that sexy 20 years ago, and now it's super expensive, and it's changes a lot. Brooklyn is, you know, right in that same spot right now. It changes. Yeah, sorry.
When were you exactly saying that Landy was waiting to change the land from residential to commercial? I thought that the zoning initially on that land was for commercial development.
Yeah, I might misspoke then. I don't remember. I think it's commercial to office then, or something like that. He was definitely waiting for a pop in the highest and best use.
For a building permit. That's
For another use that can pay more for that land. So he buys the land, you know, under a certain use, expecting that the land is gonna change the use to a use that can pay more for the land. And then he just gets all the profit because it's the residual profit of the land. That's okay.
Yeah, I don't know, it doesn't come out from the case. I mean,
Yeah,
it depends what they mean by commercially zoned for development. It depends on what this phrase means, because my understanding was that it could be developed commercially, meaning retail or offices.
I don't think I don't know if the case
Yeah,
does
that
it
maybe.
explicitly. Maybe the city planners know better than I do. The thing is, he was waiting for a pop in the highest.
And on that topic, there's actually a neat paper, we can find that, but we can post it on Amsterdam. City of
Oh, yeah,
Amsterdam.
the Havencroft, yeah.
Yeah, the Hanegraaff, where basically you have, up until 1690, it was all farmland. And then there's this curve where it starts to become a town, and so the value of the land goes from farmland to houses. And this is the longest trend of looking at home values. And it basically comes through here, and you have Napoleonic Wars, they didn't like being conquered by Napoleon, prices drop, goes, and then the CBD for Amsterdam eventually expands to the point where it takes in this town, and price and land value goes through the roof. Really interesting way to look at a long-term study of highest and best use over time. We'll find that, we'll post it, on the recitation notes for you, if you're interested in that. But, that being said,
Right, monocentric model, right, so, any questions about it, or should I just go easily, like you went really fast now? How did I change this? Yeah. So he actually has 4 principles on the monocentric city, which, basically what they do is explain how the model behaves under certain changes. The first one is that higher cities demand higher rents, and that's basically just, well, maintaining everything equal. It's like stretching that little house or tent, if you will see it in 3D, stretching it to the sides, then the land gradient basically you will have the land gradient starting from a outer space, and then it's going all the way to the center, making this increase equal in every part of the city, increasing rents all over. That would be the first principle. You can actually see this in reality. Bigger cities usually command bigger rents. New York, San Francisco, not San Francisco, San Francisco is another case. It's more land constrained. Los Angeles, Chicago, probably Boston. Before I keep going, do you guys understand the land gradient? Okay, what does it entail? What's the meaning of it? Yeah. So the land gradient is basically, and this is, as he was explaining, it's kind of a trade-off. At some point in equilibrium, everyone in the city must be equally off, right? If I'm not completely satisfied with what I'm paying and my time commuting to my workplace, I would find a better place, right? Until everyone's equally off, there's no equilibrium. So eventually, you get to that simplified model where you have people that accept to pay lower rents, but then accept to incurring a higher transportation cost that offsets exactly that transportation, that lower rent that they're paying. So basically what you have is that land gradient right here, which is transportation cost times density, right? And guys from NSRD will see it in Whitney's class to way more detail than this. But so transportation costs depend basically, it's a function of a lot of things, but basically income, technology, and like your car cost and tires and gas and all that. Falls, yeah. And then density is just basically, how big, how people pile on top of each other. Skyscraper is really dense. A mansion is not that dense, right? A big house is not that dense. So keeping income, technology, cars, gas price, and density comes whenever you have an increase in the size of the city. This slope is going to be the same. So it's just simply extending this, and the slope is going to start from here, so it's going to increase rents, as you can see in the model. Then you obviously can have other type of outcomes. You can have that, the city for any reason decided not to expand, maybe because of geographical constraints. So people have to, start talking, piling on top of each other, buildings, higher buildings, skyscrapers, and such. So density will go up, right? Things you got, again, transportation costs more or less the same. Density will go up, and then you will have a higher slope. which is what we have right there. So again, rent will increase in all the city except for the outer part, which is unchanged. Then again, he goes into more, dynamic stuff, and then he changes, here, income per capita. So you're basically changing the transportation cost function, and you're increasing it. So you're gonna have a higher transportation cost, but again, density is also a function of income. If you have more money, you're probably gonna want to live in a bigger house, you're gonna want to have more space. So density is gonna be diminished by higher income. So here the effect is not certain, with the only exception that in the center it's gonna be lower. But in the outer edges, I mean, as you can see it here, in here it increases, but then here it decreases. So this inflection point or this intersection point will depend of how much people want to spend of that higher income, how much they want to spend in bigger houses, to how much they want to save, and how much transportation cost increases. Yep. I'm sure.
It's down. So you're saying the equation for L is TC times density, basically, right? So
It's DC times density.
So at the CBD, density's high, but transportation cost is 0, right?
Yeah, you will have transportation cost function. This function will be actually, if you see the transportation cost would be actually, let me just read the draw. This is land rent, and this would be transportation cost, right?
Yeah.
So in here, this guy is paying X. In here, this guy is paying X on land, and then it's paying, Y on transportation cost. In here, this guy is paying X plus this land rent premium, and then he's also paying this other amount in transportation cost. At the end, everyone is, equally up. If you sum this and this, it's like an inverse triangle, actually. This would be the transportation cost.
So the L in this little triangle is only due to density. The transportation cost is not shown because if it was, then it would be a net 0, right?
No, so that's the land rent the land premium that people are paying due to location.
Do what?
Location.
Okay.
Location. Was it clear?
I guess, but again, it goes back to that equation, TC equals density, right?
Yeah, that's how you get the slope. And this is just defining the land premium that you pay for location. The closer you are to your house, to your workplace, the less you're gonna need to commute. So you can actually, you're gonna spend less time in, traffic. You're gonna be able to work more hours, put it some way. So you're gonna be able to pay more for.
I guess why I'm confusing, sorry if I'm absorbing over this time, but
No.
if you're on the right side of that triangle, TC is 0 and Q's high. If you move to the left, Q is low and TC is high. So how do you get a triangle function? How do you get a linear function increasing to the right when they're inversely, they act inversely, right? TC goes down, Q goes up.
Transportation costs, I should say, I guess I understand. You say why transportation costs is,
Like because transportation times this remains the same.
yeah, so Yeah, but I think I understand what you're saying, but like transportation, this transportation cost is a unitary transportation cost, right? This is simply what you would pay for, commuting from here to here. This is what this guy in here would pay. This much, about half, is what this guy living in the middle of the city would pay. And the guy living next to his office wouldn't pay anything for transportation costs. That's a cost, that's kind of a, it's not a cost that you're gonna actually feel because it's your time. But the guy living next to his office wouldn't pay anything in transportation. I mean, he wouldn't incur in any transportation costs because he lives next to it, right? Make sense?
Yeah.
So yeah, this is, it's like twice. And here it's, basically, map of the rents in Boston. You can actually see, it's interesting because you can see that, the model is not completely perfect, but you can definitely see higher rent in the center, just basically commanding a location premium due to that because people are living closer to their workplace, so they're paying more rent for that. You see the red line, also a really high rent indicator. You can get actually, you're gonna commute faster to your workplace, so it's kind of the same as living closer to the city. But you can also see that, it's not a perfect circle. You can actually go to, west to Logan Airport and whatever that's called, towards there, East Boston. And, there are other factors playing, insecurity or, it's not, so the model is not completely perfect. That's kind of the point I want to go. It's a simple model that, allows you to understand the basic principles working behind real estate. Questions? Yep.
So maybe example, that part that you were saying earlier that when transportation costs go down, people start moving to the periphery, but prices at the edge might go up or down depending on the density. Doesn't mean it depends on how far they go in the periphery, like how much do we expand the radius?
Yeah.
I answered myself. I just wanted to make sure.
All right.
Any other questions on this?
Yeah.
I know, yeah, go ahead.
You just said that the price in the CBDs would be the highest, would be lower than before if the transportation cost is lower, right?
Sorry.
You said if the transportation cost is lower, then it's, in the beginning, the total price will be.
This one here?
So why it will be lower instead of the.
This is all in real rents or real numbers. It's net of inflation. You can actually see New York has had a decrease in rents over the years. The professor actually showed that. It happens because there's a loss of centrality, and people are not as compelled to pay that much to live close to the center because now they have better ways to. They can live farther away and still get there in time, or not even get there if you can actually work from your house.
So it's possible to, like, utilities, the price will be higher than.
I hear you real bad, so.
I mean, so it's possible if the with higher transportation with lower transportation cost but higher density, then the price in CBD will be higher. Yes.
Yeah, you can definitely have higher CBD prices. The reasons are the one I just explained. If you have lower transportation costs, it'll be ambiguous as you can see, it depends on the relationship between the transportation cost decrease and, you know, the density increase.
Does that make sense? It's a function of the density component. Whereas if your density is spread out, your transportation costs decrease. It would essentially take you less time, and when your transportation costs decrease to get to the city center, you could pay higher rents, which is what that's inferring at the periphery, because it'd be absorbed in your time and transportation costs to get to the center.
I just mean, just in the center, would the price be higher, be lower, or it depends on how the function of the density or any of the transportation costs be high? Just in the center point, will the price be certainly higher or certainly lower, or is?
Just in the center point. Will the price be higher or lower if what happens? I'm sorry, my ears are not great.
I mean, like the gradient.
Okay.
Depend on the function of the density and also the transportation cost.
Correct.
But I mean, in the central point, is the price. Would it be? I mean, after the difference between difference of density and transportation cost, will the price in the central be higher than before or lower, or is possibly?
It can go both ways. I mean, you can see it. It depends. It would depend on what happens, right? I mean, and that's the idea behind the principles. We're isolating each effect, so you can guys see what happens. This one here?
If the density increase, is that what you're talking about right there, that graph?
That's where it's going up in the city center. That's what you're asking, isn't it?
She's also asking if transportation is going down at the same time, what's going to
Cost of transportation decreases.
it depends on which one's having a greater effect.
Yeah, it also depends on what the other constraints are.
Assuming the city's staying the same size, right? If density's going up, it's going to drive the price up, but the transportation costs are going to drive it back down if they're decreasing. Depends on which one is having a greater effect.
So if only the transportation cost is lower, but the density remains the same, so it will come.
Yes.
Because then that same number of people would spread out essentially because transportation costs are lower. Any other questions on this concept? It's important to get the concepts down because what's coming next week is what's called the polycentric city, which basically means, okay, if you have a CBD and rents are so high, you basically hit the land option, the call option at the periphery to develop office buildings, right? Because then you have people closer to where they want to work, and you have another basic city center at the periphery. So the same concept kind of comes in tow again, but we'll get there next week. With that being said, anything else you have to add to this?
Yeah, I'm okay.
Any other thoughts, questions?
So can you explain again how you compare the transportation costs? Because I think you also need to take into consideration the time consumption, time consuming.
Yeah. So I mean,
Because like
we're not in this class. We're not gonna learn how you actually get to the transportation costs. But you know, for now, it should be more than enough that it's a function of income, technology, car, and gas. If you have higher income, if you earn, you know, a higher amount each year, if you spend most of your time in your car, you're not going to be earning that. So, you know, your costs of commuting are high, right? If roads are really new or really efficient.
The example I want to say is that, for example, I choose to take the subway to go to work, and
Yeah.
you know, in Boston it's just $2 for no matter how many stops you can take. So then does that mean the transportation cost for me is a constant?
It's a volume.
You spend more time.
Okay, so then you need to like just use the like your income rate times the like how many hours you spend on transportation. Is that like?
Yeah, I'm not an economist, but yeah, I would guess it's somewhere like that.
And we can dive into that formula more, but really it was just more the conceptually how this all flows together. Which you're right, and that's, you can see that by the red line right here, right? If you were at AOI, if you tried to drive in the CBD, it would take you forever, and you'd pay for parking and tolls and everything else. Whereas if you pay your $250, you can hop on a red line and be there in 30 minutes. So that has allowed people at AOI to up the rate rating, right? So that's what we want to kind of get across with this map too, is how this flows.
In some sense, living, LY all the way up there, it would be kind of like living, here, right? More or less the same, idea, because even though you're living all the way back there, you can actually get pretty fast to your place. Instead of, this guy here, or someone here who has to walk or something like that.
Will you mind explain the example principle 2 again? What's the difference between growth by area and growth by density? The principle 2.
Principle 2.
And could you give some example, like why only the CBD area growth?
Yeah, so growth by area, it's basically, unconstrained city like Houston, maybe one, or Atlanta, that you actually, there's no need to build to a big density because you can always go to the next piece of land and just build on top of that, right? While, you go to San Francisco and, you got mountains everywhere, you got the ocean. So if you actually want to build something on the other piece of land, you could, but the thing is there's no land, right? So you actually got to increase the density instead of increasing the city.
Thanks.
Yeah. Something else?
Perfect. Well, we've got a few minutes left. We'll cut off at quarter till. Does anyone know what time exactly the recitation is supposed to end? 7. Yeah. We'll try and get you guys out of here sooner than that. Up next, we've got mortgage calculations that we did not get to. So if you have your calculators, break them out. If this is something you understand, you don't feel like sitting through, feel free to pull the eject cord here. Break down. You bring it down as well. Alright, in an attempt to make this a little more interesting and easier, we've got Alright, so on the mortgage side, if you have your calculators, break them out. We thought through, an exciting way to talk about mortgages, and the best we could come up with was a blown-up calculator, so that we could kind of all go through this together. So hopefully this will help for last week. If you remember your decimals, set those to 4 places out.
How do you do that again?
Right there, it's up on the board. That orange button on the black is your shift button. Then display, then the number of decimals. If you take it out to 4, that should suffice. Then if you recall from last week, our periods per year was important. And you'll get that from the question. If it's a monthly, annual, daily, quarterly compounding. To start with, and for what we're using today, because it's mortgages, and most of the mortgages you're going to deal with are going to be paid on a monthly basis, compounded monthly. And this class is going to have all monthly compounding. Set that to 12. And if you're not sure what your calculator has, hit that shift key, and then the clear button. And it should pop up 12 and like a PYR. Everybody good? We on track so far? Alright, so once we have those things dialed in, let's jump to our first question.
Zach, can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah.
What is TMB? What's that mean?
Time value of money.
How do you clear the TMB?
Hit the blue, if you want to clear the TMB, hit your blue shift key. Blue, clear all, and number 1. Should clear TMB. Perfect. Okay. How would you guys set this question up? Because when you look at a mortgage, there's 5 components, right? And we're trying to solve for one of those. Who remembers N? What's N stand for? Period, right? Interest per year, obviously your present value, your payment key. And remember, if it's cash coming into us, that's going to be positive. If it's payments we're making, it's going to be negative. And then our future value. So you see the question up there. Why don't you all take a stab at that? And we'll break it down to begin with. So borrower wants a 30-year mortgage. It's a pretty typical house residential mortgage, right? 30-year amortization. So if it's 30 years and it's compounding monthly, how many periods are you going to have? How many payment periods? 360. So you take your T number of years times your N number of periods. 12 times 30. So put in 360 for your N. Just like this. What's our interest rate? 12%. Compounded what, monthly? So you're just going to put in 12% because all of our payments per year are set to 12. So put in 12.
1%?
So what?
Would you use 1%?
No, be 12% compounded monthly.
Annual
interest
monthly
rate.
would be 12% per month or 144% per year. When you've got that in there, it says 1% per month simple rate.
Yes, times 12 months.
So it would be 1%. If you've got it set to 360 periods, 12%, or, you know.
Yeah, but that's the interest per year.
Yeah, so it would be 1%.
That's per month. It's
You
per
said
year.
it's 360 periods, and you've got it 12 times per year, right? So whether it's a 360-year loan, or you've got another problem with it. I mean, if I'm wrong here, I'm happy to be wrong, but I think we're setting it up wrong.
Yeah. It's actually right.
The other units need to be
I mean, you're definitely right in concept. I don't know how that actual calculator works, but yeah, you're right. If you're doing it monthly, you should do 1%.
Conceptually, but when it comes to putting it in the calculator, this is how it's going to read it and write it up.
So you're doing it formulaically, like, you know, as if we're
Yeah,
writing
you look
out-
at formula.
Okay.
You're right, you take it as 1%, which is right here in the formula. You can see. 1%, 1 over 1.1%. 360 is your periods, right? And so your monthly payment, because if we left it at 12, it would essentially be 822 times 89. You'd multiply this times 12 to come up with your annual payment. Instead, we're functioning on a monthly payment. Is this clear? Is everybody okay with this? Formulaically, are you guys good with this? How the payment function works?
So the calculator knows that the 360 is month.
Yes, because you set your payments per year. It's breaking out. Does that make sense? So when we first did, when we did it versus your payments per year, we set the 12. So it knows that of the periods, it's 30 years. So it knows when you put in your 66, it automatically calculates.
On this one is different.
Yeah, I'm not too familiar with it. I know it has the same function. Alright, we good? You got the 30-year down? Basic concepts? Next, we're gonna look at solving for n. Your number of periods. If you're interested in the math, this is how it works out. Or it's a lot easier to use your calculator or Excel instead of going the natural log route.
Will we need to know the natural?
No, you won't need to know that. So why don't you all take a stab at this one? Yeah, so this is going to be a typical, like Paul was pointing out, your typical car salesman loan, right? He's going to want to know how much you can afford to change each month. He's going to back into a price that he's going to be able to sell your car for based on the number of periods he wants to pay back.
Future value. Yeah. Now you follow money, the 80 Yeah, right.
What do you guys get for answers on this? Remember to put in a negative to your payment.
Interest rate is low. I think your calculation
Alright, did everybody get 216? We'll knock this out together real quick. So you're solving for n, so n's going to be blank. Our interest is what? 10%, right? Plug in 10 for our interest. Our present value, $50,000. We're paying $500 a month. Remember that negative sign.
Yeah.
And your future value is going to be 0 because you're going to amortize it. Kill it. So we solve for n. Does that look familiar?
Yeah. Yep.
Perfect. Hit that shift key.
Yeah.
And then hit C, clear all, actually pop up how many you have. And then type in your numbers, so hit 12 and shift and the PYR key, which is under your payment. Which one is Alright, we've only got a couple left. This is all four. This is going to be a little bit trickier. Alright, if you own the building, and you knew in a couple of years that you were going to have to put new roofs on it. how would you go about figuring out how much money you need to put in your capital reserves each month and withhold so that you didn't have to put up a whole bunch of money in 5 years that you didn't have? How would you guys set this question up?
Just on a calculator?
In general.
So your future value is 2000.
Right, you got it.
So $100,000 is future value, I think. Yep. On this one, and then rate is 6%. You have to set it up for monthly and then go for 60 periods. If it's 5 years. And then the interest rate here is 6% as I mentioned. Payment would be 2,000. So you'd be looking for present value with it.
You would be looking for. Sorry, you'd be solving for your future value after 5 years.
You like to run yourself.
Go back.
Solving.
How many months?
How many months does it take?
You have to.
So walk me through this. How do you guys plug it in? We've got, Blair just right off saying $100,000 for our future value. That's going to be like
Your payment.
So you need to answer about 10. Yeah.
payment is what for your upfront?
Negative 2,000.
Exactly.
And then your present value is 0. Then your rate is 6%.
Everybody on board with this?
So the 5 years is red herring?
No, it's saying in 5 years, you're going to have to pay this money. At what point do you want to start putting money away? So you basically bring it back from 5 years out. So if you know in 60 months, you're going to have to pay $100,000. You track with me?
I mean,
So then
5 years is.
after 15 months, you're going to have to start putting away $2,000 a month. And hope you can hit a risk-free rate of 6% where you're not going to lose your money. So realistically, what you would probably want to do if you're in this scenario is it would be 6%. You'd probably match the duration to whatever the a treasury you're putting in a risk-free vehicle to hold on to cash. Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry? Can't hear you. So if your deposits were at the beginning or end of each month, that's basically set up in your calculator because you're going to collect interest on the end at the end of the month, right? So if you were loaned money on the first, you wouldn't pay the interest and principal on that until the end of the month because it would build up over time.
And then switch the calculator over to period.
And yeah. So in your calculator, you can switch between beginning and end. So it's italicized essentially just to say, hey, this is at the end rather than at the beginning, because if you paid it in at the beginning, would it take more or less periods, do you think? Less. It'd take less periods because you're accumulating interest. You basically have an extra period in there.
Quarter of a period difference.
Yeah, quarter of a period difference. All right, I think we have one left, maybe two. Clear your answer. 45 months, we all good on this? Conceptually. All right. Now, if you look at the present value of a mortgage, it's like looking at you're basically looking at an investment. What would you be looking to pay for this bond, if you do, it basically came to fruition in 20 years and it had a 12% yield on it. What would you pay for it? So, yeah, it says nothing to say. And for the record on the beginning and end stuff, for this class, you're gonna want to leave everything on the end. When you're dealing with mortgages, it's always gonna be end. Where it makes sense if you did it at the beginning is if you had a personal savings account, something you deposited money into, and it accumulated interest over the course of the month.
Or if rents are paid in advance, so if you're trying to evaluate a lease, you might be having less.
Default setting is career, so it, you know, calculated default setting is
If it's in the beginning, it's gonna show it on your screen, it'll say DEG. Otherwise, it'll be like.
No.
Any questions on this? What do you guys come up with for answers? You plugged in a negative on 1,000, because it's cash outflow. Get anxious. Any questions? Doing pretty good? Alright. Balloon mortgages, this is the last question. You guys are out here today. Do you guys all understand the idea of a term loan, balloon mortgage? Anybody want to explain that to the class? Give it some color. There?
Sorry, the guy talks all the time. It's a mortgage that isn't fully amortized. So it just goes like you've got a 25-year amortization schedule, but it cuts off extension. So you owe the balance of it.
Exactly. So what Laird's saying is, and this is popular in commercial loans, right, where banks aren't going to, they'll amortize the loan over 15, 20, 25 years, which means over the course of that time, you're killing principal and interest. And if you paid it out to 25 years, if that was, or in this case, if it amortized over 30 years, if it amortized over 30 years, you pay it down to zero. But oftentimes the banks, in order to hedge some interest rates, will oftentimes put a term on it, and that will be 5 to 7 years. And so you will pay, at the end of that 7 years, a balloon payment, okay? So you're paying your monthly payment, and at the end of 7 years, you pay off all the principal that's left, the outstanding loan balance that's left on that loan. Does that make sense? I see some glazed over eyes. So if you have a loan, it has a 30-year amortization. That means that's the life of the loan. It's dead at the end of year 30. And you're going to be paying your principal and interest on that loan in your monthly installments in this example. And the bank says, hey, at the end of year 5, we want out of the deal. We want our money back. So you say, okay, I'm going to enter this deal knowing that I'm not going to be able to pay this loan off for 30 years. The bank's going to want their money back in 5. So if at the last month in year 5, you have to pay the bank back for first your monthly interest and principal payment, and then on top of that, the outstanding loan balance still left on the loan. And then the bank's got their money. You basically do that, realistically through a sale or a refinance, is what you're looking at. So that's how this formula is set up at the bottom, right? You have your ongoing payments. You culminate with a single point in time, which is year 5, where you pay back remaining loan balance. So try to work this out on your own. Think through it. There's 2 ways to do this. We'll dive into those on the next slide. I want you guys to get a chance to punch it out first. In those 10 years, do you guys think you'll pay off? Do you think your payments will be comprised mainly of principal or interest? At the beginning, first 10 years. Interest, exactly. How we doing? Got some answers? Here's a solution. $74,734. Resonate?
I got a negative answer, is that, net, not negative. That makes sense.
A negative 74? Yeah, you switch your, did you put a negative for your payment?
Yeah.
Can you run through those numbers right quick?
Absolutely. So you're in. So there's two ways to go about this, right?
But you know what, I think the thing that's a little tricky about this, you have to start out by computing the payment first for the loan. So you first punch in the loan with its full amortization and compute the payment. And then that payment amount will be in your payment register. And then you can use either of these two methods to compute the whole loan.
Perfect.
Because I think maybe what's throwing people off is they had to get that 822.89 first.
And then compute your present value.
Is all this stuff in the book also? Is it in chapters everywhere?
Yeah, this is chapter 8. Which we haven't gotten to yet.
One side. We had the back side.
Yeah, chapter 8 and chapter 8 back
Yeah,
up.
it's the same.
All the-
It's the same as the I mean, you know, we can really access the business. One of the, you are deducting the. I don't understand what you are saying.
That's what it is.
Take that. Can you go back to what?
Draw more times whatever you say.
Yes. Present value, all the amount of I think the chapter starts
Are they calculated from the Well, here, I don't understand the first one. It's 241.
Alright, we good, you guys, are we good on this, we can walk through it real quick? Your end periods, if you do it from the, if you do it as a present value, it's 5 years.
Yeah.
You paid it off after 10, right, so you have 20 remaining, times 12 payments per year is 240. So that's our
Can you
end.
just go back to like how you calculated the payment amount in the first place?
How we got to the payment amount right there?
Right, because this is a two-step calculation.
You wanna see the first slide we did when we first came in?
So, no, so
That's how you
just like
punch-
talk through like.
like conceptually so we know where we're
conceptually,
at.
like which of these, so.
Punch 30 years or 360 into the N. And interest rate into, what is it, 12% into I, and 80,000 into PV. And 0 into FP. Now compute payment.
And then you just leave it, you just leave
It'll
it
stay,
as
it'll
there.
stay in there.
Okay.
So now, you can change the N to either 240 or 120.
Okay.
If you change the N to 240, then you're gonna compute the PV, right? If you change the N to 120, then you're gonna compute the FV. Either way, you get the same answer. Don't be thrown off by the sign, whether it's positive or negative, it's just gonna, it's always gonna be opposite.
If you get hung up on that, just go back to the NACO that year.
No, it was the transfer between like how you keep the number in your calculator.
So yeah, just to walk them through it, let's say 240 into N.
Absolutely.
And now compute PV. Right? Or alternatively, get the 80,000 back in the PV. And now go to the N and change it to 120 and compute the FV. Right, don't be worried by that negative and positive, it's always gonna be opposite. You know, if the PV is 80,000, you know, if you're the borrower, you're gonna receive the 80,000 and the other stuff is what you're gonna pay. If you're the lender, you're gonna pay the 80,000 and the other
But
you're
future
gonna receive. It's just gonna be
valuation,
opposite.
future valuation of the remaining payment.
On your calculator.
Any other thoughts on this? Have a good week.
Well, actually,
I mean, it's.
that is.
No, but like on our.
现在在 building 我们这个里面你想说你是不是要快点回去做实验？那就是去偷了吧？那在哪里见？去偷了你为什么要到你那里？好了好了，那你大概5分钟到10分钟下来，拜拜。 徐迪飞，你到底 take 了哪些课啊？你会 take 谁？设计那个 market， 还有 tangible interface。他上了讲教很多数学，这个有上很多。这是那个 city planning 的你会去上那个 tangible， 所以你后来没有打算要上这边的，因为太多数学了。好了，好了。
We put it away, we'll post the slides on sale. Absolutely not. We did a presentation around this.
This is.